What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Body Lock. It's your man Ant Walker, joined by my good friend and colleague Matthew Wells. So we have a few things to talk about. First on the docket, it is the eve of UFC 254. Not even really the eve, because on our time, like this will be by morning. This fight is going to be starting up. So we've got several hours to talk about this and have it still be relevant. So let's hurry up and get to it before the fight
Get
starts.
it. Let's
Matt,
get
now
it.
there seems to be some controversy today at the weigh-ins. There's been a vocal contingent of people in the MMA world who seem to think there was some trickery at the scale. Khabib looked pretty worn out on that scale, and this is a scene that we've seen before. But controversy as far as the official who is supposed to man the scale not adjusting the dials properly or waiting for the counterweight to stop moving and whatnot. So there's some speculation that Khabib didn't truly weigh in at championship weight, and this fight is still going through because reasons. Uh, Mr. Wells, please shine some light on this. Share your wisdom. What do you make of this entire situation?
There's quite a few things I can make of it, but I will just address right now for the moment the fact that Khabib may have missed weight, and I think that is just like grasping at straws. Like we're really this bored right now on our Friday afternoon that we're this concerned about how fast an official read the scale. It's like you guys need hobbies. Like, all you people out there that are really going hardcore, like analyzing this footage, like a Zapruder film, like trying to figure out if the weight was off by a quarter of a pound or the thing. Like, what are we doing here? Like for me, if he is within a pound, like it's fine. Like I know there's regulations to where you must be 155 on the dot, like that, or lower, right? You can't be above 155, and that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, I mean, is Habib the guy that we really suspect of being a cheater in his path in the UFC? I can't recall any other instance where it's like, oh, Habib's a shady guy. We need to really watch our p's and q's with everything this guy does, especially on the weigh-in scale, where he's had really no issues before, except for I guess making it to the scale that one time against Tony Ferguson because he was almost dying in the hospital. That's a completely different thing. But I can't hear you. Go ahead. What did you say?
Sorry, I hit mute. The
Yeah, yeah.
Abel Trujillo fight he missed weight for.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And he lost that fight. But this in particular, I watched this tape over and over once I saw people really kind of making this a big deal, and I'm just like, there's nothing here. There's really nothing here, people. It's one of those things, like you said, just because he's the first guy on the scale, just because he gave this dramatic sigh of relief. Like, did you expect like officials were behind the scenes, like texting each other saying, "Hey, read it quick," because he's maybe a half pound off. Like, just think of all of the coordinated effort that it would take for this to be a legitimate concern right now.
You know what? Allow me to dissent just a little bit here,
Go
because
for it.
I
Go
I
for it.
am with you as far as the conspiracy theorist of MMA really need to find something else to do.
Yeah.
Um, the most substantial thing that I read or saw about this at all, as far as the analytics that someone was piecing together to say, okay, there was some trickery on the scale, was from someone on Twitter who had like 4 followers. So I'm sorry, I just wasn't listening to you. Like, sorry, I don't care what you have to say at that point. Um, and then I guess we can look toward maybe Habib himself has not necessarily cheated on the scale, but we can look no further than his own camp at AKA Daniel Cormier had his little incident. I believe that was before UFC 210, where he held on to the towel and all the controversies after that. I thought that was pretty overblown, but whatever. But here's a key difference in what we saw with Daniel Cormier and what we saw in Habib Nurmagomedov. Daniel Cormier did that in front of the New York State Athletic Commission. There were commission officials who were there, who are in charge of this entire thing, making sure everything was above board. And if he did game the system, he game the actual system that has regulatory control over what's going on. Khabib Nurmagomedov has had his quote unquote controversy on Fight Island, an unregulated territory. Even if the UFC were to bring officials over from real commissions and they act as a commission and act as a governing body, they are at that moment, they are employees of the UFC. So it calls into question the entire thing. Keep in mind, Fight Island was created to skirt regulation in the first place. We are also what month and some change, 2 months or whatever, removed from the trilogy fight between Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic. I do recall you and I having a conversation, much like we are now, about how that fight still was able to happen when Daniel Cormier admitted to having COVID-19 as he was preparing for this fight. If you think that the UFC, if in an unregulated territory, or I should make correction, a self-regulated territory, um, that in Nevada they swept that under the rug and let Cormier fight when he could have been a contagious threat to those around him to save this pay-per-view that otherwise would have had Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera in the co-main event. Do you think they're going to risk having Robert Whittaker versus Jared Cannonier as their main event in a Muslim majority land that is actually paying for this whole setup of Fight Island to have the biggest star, one of, if not the biggest star in mixed martial arts, Habib Nurmagomedov, off the card for the purposes of pesky things like health, safety, and regulation? Just not happening. Not happening.
Yeah, listen, I wouldn't put it past the UFC for a second, honestly. I really wouldn't. And just as crazy as it is to think that, they had this coordinated effort to make this happen, and he was just really in so much pain. Like, let's just get him in there. Let's make it look like he made weight and get him out of there, and we're gonna have our main event and everything's gonna be good. I mean, listen, like you mentioned with the DC thing, it's kind of shady. Kind of shady how he had COVID. Other fights that, a guy gets announced that he has COVID a month out, we're getting pulled off of cards. But DC gets to say, hey, I had COVID like 2 weeks out and I'm still here fighting. Like, that is super shady. And then to also go to your point about the towel trick, the towel trick back in NYC, like, that was a legitimate thing because it is clear that he's pushing against the towel. And I did multiple experiments of this in my house immediately after. How much pressure do you have to actually apply to a towel to adjust your weight that much? And it's man, I tell you what, I wish I would have documented all this because it's not very much at all. I know people actually did that. It's all over YouTube. People did their own things. It's
low-key, I tried it too. Yeah.
See, you know you did. You know you did.
Yeah,
but try to exhaust my experimentation, sir.
but here's what I find funny about that, though. Like, that he planned this, he set this up perfectly to lean on the towel just right. Like, it took multiple attempts for me to even have an idea of how to gauge the pressure, and I'm leaning this way. Oh, this takes off way too much weight. All right, this doesn't take off enough. So he did in one take. He was perfectly on championship weight. I'm sorry. Sure. Get all the way the fuck up out of here with that one. That did not happen like that. Okay. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there was some gamesmanship there. I'm certain of it, but I think it's overblown. But it's still a funny thing. It's one of those funny things that I love to bring up in MMA. So please carry on, sir.
No, and just to bring it back to the Khabib thing, it's like I've witnessed, numerous weigh-ins in person, right? Where some people will get on the scale and the commissioner, the regulator, who's ever reading out the official weight after looking at the scale, there's been numerous times where that guy will spend half of a second looking at it and be like 170. And then the next 170 fighter will come on the scale and they'll sit there and do every little tippy tap possible to make sure it's perfectly in the middle, where it's like, come on, like there's really no consistency at all because you're not using a digital scale to where it's going to have a readout to where the numbers are going to be the same for everybody. You're kind of dealing with the analog weigh-in scale where there's wiggle room. Literally, that's how the balance works.
Right.
The balance is literally the wiggle room, right? So I get it. Like, yeah, a half pound, and it goes back to my larger theory or my larger point about weigh-ins in general, especially when it's like you have to have everybody on the exact same pound. Until someone can come up with some sort of scientific experiment that will prove a fighter has an advantage if he weighed zero point 0.5 pounds more 24 hours before they fought after ballooning up to another 15 or 20 pounds on the night of the fight, then you can actually begin to tell me that this is something that we need to really address in a serious tone. Because the amount of just mental gymnastics you have to go through to say he was 0.5, 0.25 pounds heavy, and that is the reason this fight played out this way 24 hours later. Dude, let's be serious about what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was kind of a slow news week. Um,
Yeah,
maybe that was it. I
amount of
mean, there was like actual news involving frequent topic of discussion, Mike Perry, that's actually like newsworthy and valid. Nobody cares about that. But let's talk about how the scale was shaking a little bit, and that is the real conversation topic here. I think you said it perfectly. I mean, people are just bored. Like, find a hobby.
yeah,
Here, the
yeah,
good news is you can go to bed early tonight, and then when you wake up, there'll be fights on. So you've got the entire day to goof off and come up with more conspiracy theories. So
exactly.
enjoy your
Exactly.
day, fellas.
And I remember in 2019, just last year, there was a string of fighters who missed weight and they won fights. This year in 2020, the fighters who are missing weight are losing. So I remember in 2019, the big theory was, oh, if guys missed weight, they have an advantage. Where's that theory in 2020? Did the fighters who make weight all of a sudden become better competitors than their opponents who missed weight? Like, what do we? Like,
Yeah,
it's just we just make up things. We just
it's
make up things
so
as we
many
go.
other variables. It's so many other variables that it just can't be
Exactly.
broken down to that simple of an equation. But when you have
Exactly.
simple minds at work, they will come up with simple things that are just simple. So
Yeah.
this is the sport that we have decided to dedicate a significant portion of our lives to. So what does that say about us? Maybe we're just as simple.
We are. We're simple creatures.
Travesty.